Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really incredible cinematic journey through time. We're going to contrast the incredibly intimate, everyday life of one single man against the staggering, almost incomprehensible scale of an archaic empire. We'll be digging into historical records translated from early 20th century sources that give us this rare, totally unfiltered look right into the twilight of the Romanov dynasty. So let's jump right into this.
160 million. Seriously, just let that number sink in for a second. Delivering a number like that carries a massive dramatic weight because, well, those were the stakes. This massive figure represents the total number of subjects living across the Earth's surface under the absolute rule of one single individual, Tsar Nicholas II.
But to really understand the ruler of millions, we first have to look at the man in total isolation. Imagine the hushed, ticking clock intimacy of an early winter morning. Long before the chaotic noise of court life begins, at exactly 8 a.m., the Tsar wakes up. According to the source material, there's no grand fanfare here at all. He starts his day in surprising simplicity. He eats a very modest breakfast and sits down quietly to read through his morning telegrams and carefully write in his personal diary.
Section 1. The Weight of the Crown.
To truly understand the man beneath that jewel-encrusted crown, we've got to look at how he structured his private hours. After that simple 8 a.m. breakfast, his strict daily routine kicks in. By 10 a.m., he's deeply engaged with his ministers, poring over reports. At 11:30 a.m., he reserves time for a brisk walk. And then lunch is at 1 p.m. But here's a totally fascinating detail straight from the records. Before his meals, specially locked containers of food are brought to him. He actually tastes the food meant for his soldiers just to ensure its quality before it's distributed to them. He was also a remarkably reluctant modernist. The historical accounts tell us he absolutely detested using the telephone. He didn't even have one in his personal study. Instead, he much preferred handwriting his notes with a thick blue pencil. And to escape the crushing mental exhaustion of his office, he demanded severe physical exertion. He'd often violently row boats until he was completely exhausted, literally just to clear his head.
That clear-headedness actually translated directly into how he dealt with his inner circle. He famously encouraged his ministers to speak without fear, telling them point-blank, "I love to hear the truth." The records really emphasize his desire for complete honesty, constantly pushing his officials to give him the unvarnished facts rather than what they just assumed the emperor wanted to hear.
Section 2. The Inner Circle. Because beyond all that endless state paperwork, the Tsar's true sanctuary was his family. During those strict 11:30 a.m. garden breaks, he wasn't just walking his dogs. He was desperately trying to carve out time with his heir, the young Tsarevich Alexei. These quiet moments in the gardens were his anchor. It was just a father, cherishing stolen minutes, before the weight of the empire called him right back.
His evening protocol is incredibly telling too. We're talking family tea at 5 p.m. and dinner at 8 p.m. But the work, it didn't stop. He would work tirelessly through the night, often taking breaks to read books out loud to his wife, Empress Alexandra, before finally retiring well past 12:30 a.m. He rarely slept more than a few hours a night, just a man perpetually burdened by his duty.
Section 3. The 1913 Grand Jubilee.
All right, now we need to dramatically shift gears and pull the camera way, way back. Because outside the quiet walls of his study, the empire was absolutely roaring in celebration. February 21, 1913. This number, 300, was plastered across literally every corner of the nation. It marked the 300-year anniversary of the Romanov dynasty's rule over Russia. From Michael Romanov in 1613 all the way to Nicholas II in 1913, this was a massive celebration of survival, absolute power, and unbelievable expansion. Over those 3 centuries, the Russian Empire experienced this explosive expansion, swallowing up territories until it covered an astonishing 1/6 of the Earth's entire landmass. I mean, the sheer geographic scale of this domain completely and utterly dwarfed the quiet, disciplined man sitting at its center. But the crucial question is, how do you actually govern a landmass of that size? Well, based on historical census data, the empire contained roughly 140 different languages. It was a dizzying mosaic of Orthodox Christians, Catholics, Muslims, Jews, and Buddhists, all expected to operate seamlessly under the umbrella of one single ruler. Which brings us to the Jubilee itself. Historically, the texts from this specific era framed the Tsar and his family not just as politicians, but as glorious unifiers. They were viewed almost as divine saviors of the nation. They were presented to the masses as the living, breathing glue holding this incredibly fragile, sprawling mosaic together. The historical texts from the time are just filled with glowing praise. Through the contemporary lens of 1913, the sources credit the Romanovs with elevating the empire from the abyss of the 17th century, unifying the Orthodox faith, and expanding borders all the way from the Baltic Sea in the west to the Pacific Ocean in the east. Now, we obviously aren't here to take a side or endorse these views, but rather to explain the incredible mythological status the regime had built for itself by this point in history based on the source material.
Section 4. The Final Illusion.
This brings our narrative to its climax and really highlights the stark juxtaposition that defines this entire era. We're looking at a profound, almost tragic dramatic irony here. On one hand, you have a quiet, disciplined man who writes with a blue pencil, actively avoids modern technology, and just wants to walk his dogs. On the other hand, a monumental, archaic empire stretching across a sixth of the globe, boiling over with 140 different languages.
It was, quite literally, a fragile humanity sitting at the dead center of absolute, staggering power, which leaves us staring at a deeply unsettling historical reality. This grand illusion of control was standing right on the brink of shattering. And that forces us to ask one final, incredibly provocative question. Could this fragile humanity truly sustain such absolute power? Or is that kind of isolation just the inevitable cost of an empire? If you want to uncover the answers and explore even more hidden realities behind history's grandest illusions, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for learning with me in this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.